Hey folks, this is Jesse Cope, back with another episode of the American Soul Podcast. Hope y'all are doing well, wherever y'all are and whatever part of the day you're in. Sure to appreciate y'all joining me, as always, giving me a little bit of your time. For those of y'all that continue to share the podcast with others, to tell people about it, I'm incredibly grateful for your support and encouragement. Those of y'all that send messages, social media and other places, tell me about it when you see me. Thank you. Still working on that little thing I mentioned the other day. Pretty excited about it. I think y'all will be. We'll see. Certainly is due to the increase. Well, we'll get there at some point. I don't think I have much of anything left. Background noise is a little different again today. Taking a walk somewhere else. Temperature was almost fallish recently, so that was nice. I guess we'll get going. So we talked, I think this has been about a week ago. We did a little piece on caring for the poor, and I mentioned there were a few quotes more that I wanted to get through. And so we're going to try and do that today. And I'm going to start with a few that I found out and about. And then I'm going to finish up with a little excerpt out of the Founder's Bible, a little story that I had not heard before, which I think is pretty phenomenal. The Founder's Bible, they did a real good job, folks. And if you haven't taken the chance to purchase that Bible, I strongly would recommend it. It just really is a phenomenal resource, along with the Patriots Bible and the America's God and Country Encyclopedia of Quotes. So definitely household items, and as I say often, should be in every classroom. First thing I wanted to read is because so we're going to talk about socialism a good bit today versus uh, freedom and independence. And I already know my brain just kicked in that I failed to get one Bible verse that I really needed to. But I did get one, and that is from 2 Thessalonians 3, and it's verse 10. For even when we were with you, we used to give you this order, that if anyone is not willing to work, then he is not to eat either. The other Bible verse was a parable that Jesus told about a vineyard owner. And for those of y'all that are familiar with the Bible, you'll be familiar with this. And Jesus went out and hired some people early in the day, or the vineyard owner did, God, and agreed to pay them one denarii, or one, whatever the daily wage was. Went out later in the day, found some more again later in the day, and even way late in the evening with just an hour or two of work left, found some more. And at the end of the day, he settled accounts with them and paid everybody, and he paid everybody the same, paid them all one day's wages. And the ones that worked all day, understandably so from a human point of view, were pretty upset about that. They said, hey, we bore all the heat of the day, and we did all this work, and we're getting paid the same as they are. And the vineyard owner said, hey, this is what we agreed to. I didn't do you any wrong. You know, you agreed to work for a day's wage, and you did, and I'm paying you what we agreed to. If I want to pay the others the same, you know, what right do you have to complain? It's my money. Don't I have the right to do what I want with what's mine? And that goes completely, both of these go completely against the modern narrative that gets foisted onto Christians so often about, well, if you're really Christian, you would support socialism, communism, and welfare. And the truth is exactly the opposite. No, if you really are following the teachings of Christ, you would be absolutely opposed to socialism, communism, and welfare. Because when you go into any one of those programs, you're not really being benevolent at all. You're pretending at being benevolent by stealing from somebody else that's worked for what they have to give, quote unquote, give to somebody else to make yourself feel better, right? Because if you were really just wanting to be beneficent, you would just go ahead and give out of your own pocket. It's like the argument with illegal immigration that we saw. It was so dramatic recently. Like when the illegal immigrants were bused to different locations, the people that said that we had to have open borders suddenly didn't want the illegal immigrants there. Well, that's because they don't really care about the illegal immigrants at all. And I say that carefully because I don't really know the heart of the person. But if they do really care about them, it would be hard to go about it in a worse way. Because when somebody's doing something wrong, you don't encourage them in that act if you really love them. You discipline them and you help them to deal with the consequences of those actions if there are some, and then to move on with life, hopefully without making those mistakes again, or at least lessening them greatly. So when if you really care about the poor and the needy, your goal shouldn't be to steal somebody else's money to give to them. I've had this discussion with young people quite a bit, and even some adults, but mostly young people. And they get it. They immediately get it. And the question is always, if I walk up to somebody and I say, hey, I see this poor person on the street, and I give them some food. I go buy them some food and give it to them, or give them, even if I just give them a $10 bill out of my wallet. Am I being kind? And their response is always yes, of course. And I said, okay, well, what if now I walk up to so and so and I force them to give me $10, take it out of their wallet by force, threaten them, and then I go and buy a hamburger or something to give to the poor person, or give that $10 to the poor person? Am I kind? And they're like, no, of course not. That's horrible. You're just thief and bully or whatever. And so young people immediately get it. They see it. And yet as a society, that's exactly what we've done. And then we pretend that we're kind, and we're not at all. And so we're going to run through some of these quotes, however many we can get through. We're going to start with Jefferson. I love to start with Jefferson because the left loves to idolize Jefferson as this anti-Christian, anti, really almost anti-freedom uh, individual. And geez, that just couldn't be farther from the truth. And so this is a comment of his. He did a prospectus. He wrote a translation of a Frenchman's treatise on political economy. And in that, he rewrote the quote, to take from one, because it is thought that his own industry and that of his fathers has acquired too much, in order to spare to others, who or whose fathers have not exercised equal industry and skill, is to violate arbitrarily the first principle of association, being the guarantee to give everyone of a free exercise of his industry and the fruits acquired by it. So, that's a lot of words, right? But what they're saying is this idea that you can look at somebody and say, well, you don't really need that extra money or extra watch or first watch or jacket or whatever. So I'm going to go ahead and take it and give it to these other people that really need it. Well, you de-incentivize the people that are working hard and the people that aren't, because the people that aren't say, well, shoot, if I just sit here long enough, somebody's going to give me something anyway. And you have no idea whether they got in that situation because of their own poor decisions, right? You always hear this about the minimum wage. Wow, you really got to raise the minimum wage. There's no way for a family of four to live on minimum wage, at age 40. Folks, harsher or not, if you're got a family of four and you're 40 years old and you're working minimum wage, something's gone wrong. We've made some poor decisions along the way. Yeah, there's some possibility that you got laid off. Something really bad happened and you're having to start over again. Yes. But even if that's true, that's no excuse for taking from others because we feel like, oh, well, they've got all this extra. We're just going to take some from them. You know, this idea of everybody pay their fair share. No, we're all citizens. All should be treated the same. You have the same tax rate across the board, not a graduated tax rate. It doesn't matter whether you're poor, right? And we'll get to that, I think, a couple of those Bible quotes. But the Bible in the Old Testament, just in case we don't, is very clear on that. You say for justice, treating people equally, part of that means not being partial to the poor or the rich, right? So we like to really just attack the rich today because they're rich and defend the poor today simply because they're poor. Well, you can't do that, folks. That's not based on actions or merit, like Abigail Adams talked about. That's just based on superficial. That's like looking at somebody because of the color of their skin and saying, well, we're going to treat you this way because you're this color, and we're going to treat you over here this way because you're a different color. It's the exact same thing. This next one is from Jefferson again, a letter to Thomas Cooper, I think, 1802. If we can but prevent the government from wasting the labors of the people under the pretense of taking care of them, they must become happy. You know, this idea that the government's going to swoop in and take money from others to give to you if you're one of those people receiving that money, and that somehow that's a good thing. It's just absolutely mind-boggling. The fact that we're greedy enough, selfish enough, lazy enough to say, yeah, just go ahead and take some more money from those people over there and give it to me. And then not only that, we're such cowards that we go ahead and continue to vote for that group of people. And Jefferson here is saying, you know, the government isn't really taking stuff away from citizens, wasting their labors, what they've earned for. You're not taking care of them. It's just an excuse for greed. Margaret Thatcher, I know she's not from America, British Prime Minister, but this quote I read years and years ago, and it's stuck with me forever, and it's a phenomenal one. It's a great one. And this was in response to a series of questions when she was asking about the opposition party or something, talking about whether they needed to get rid of some of the policies that had been enacted, these socialist policies. I would much prefer to bring them down as soon as possible. I think they've made the biggest financial mess that any government's ever made in this country for a very long time. And socialist governments traditionally do make a financial mess. They always run out of other people's money. It's quite a characteristic of them. Then they start to nationalize everything. And people just do not like more and more nationalization, and they're now trying to control everything by other means. They're progressively reducing the choice available to ordinary people. I almost didn't read that second half, but the last line was worth it. Reduce the choice. The more socialism and communism you have, folks, the less freedom you have. And you've got to remember, we've talked about this Bible verse often, where freedom is truly the spirit of freedom. You've got to have the Holy Spirit there. You've got to have God's Spirit there in order to have freedom and liberty, right? And so the farther you get away from freedom by default, you really dig into it, the farther you're getting away from God. You can probably say it the reverse is better. The farther you get away from God, the farther you get away from freedom and liberty. So we've got just a little bit of time left. And obviously, this is a topic that we could take quite a bit of time on. But I wanted to go through and read this little excerpt that I found in the Founder's Bible, And it has to deal with early colonies in America. And John Smith Jamestown. I don't know, but we're going to read through this, and it's just a couple paragraphs, and it's talking about a starving time when food got so scarce because the people had refused to work anymore. They had set up this socialist system, the company from London, and which basically gave everybody equal property, right? Well, what inevitably happens, what we see today in the United States, what we've seen coming for decades, especially as more socialist communist policies, the farther we get away from the biblical verse in Thessalonians about if you're not willing to work, then you don't get to eat. Well, some people are the lazy ones are going to be more than happy to just sit there and take. And so the colony was really in dire straits. And so John Smith had been governor prior to this and had implemented a policy drawn directly from the Bible. And this is from one of the biographers that they pulled for the Bible. The majority of them, unaccustomed to discipline or regular employment, showed symptoms of stubborn resistance to his authority, which provoked him to reprove them in sharp terms. He told them that their recent sufferings ought to have worked a change in their conduct, and that the majority of them must be more industrious or starve. That it was not reasonable that the labors of 30 or 40 honest and industrious men should be devoted to the support of 150 idle loiterers, and that, therefore, whoever would not work must not eat. And so you see that this applying this rule. So again, even before we were the United States, when it was America, when the colonies were forming, we're already turning toward the Bible as the foundation of our society. And so historians recorded the result. It was the best law possible for such a time and place. It would hardly have been necessary except for the foolish socialistic plan of the London Company, not to give land to each man to work for himself, but to have all work and share alike. The lazy man, of course, was quite willing to let others do the work as long as they could eat of the common stores. Even the men of energy would not work very hard, for they could thus add nothing to their own property. And you can say, well, that's kind of a greedy point of view, maybe, but you want to have ownership of that, folks. And when you look at the New Testament, when you look at the Old Testament, the biblical basis for this, again and again, it goes back to we have a responsibility to use well the talents that God gave us. And we have, as Jesus said in that parable talking about the vineyard, don't we have a right to do what we want with what is our own? And that's really what it comes down to, folks. Socialism isn't kind or caring. It's saying, well, I know better than you, so I'm going to take what you earned and I'm going to give it to this other person over here to earn favor with them and to make myself feel better. So I'm going to steal from one to try and get a benefit for myself over here. That's what it really boils down to. It has nothing to do with the teachings of Jesus Christ or the Old Testament. And some people will point to the communal lifestyle of the early Christians, but all of that was completely voluntary. And people gave as much as they wanted to give out of their resources. And that's a whole different situation. And so, yet again, this is just another example, folks. If we really want to care for the poor and the needy, we have to do it individually. And above and beyond that, if we really want to turn our country around and we really want to help the widow and the orphan, the poor and the needy, we've got to put God back in the center of our country, of our individual lives and our public lives. And if we don't, we're going to end up like the starving time with John Smith back in the colonial era, or we're going to end up like the Bolsheviks and the revolution in Stalinist Russia, or the Maoist Chinese. And all of those were and remain pretty horrible situations for millions and millions of people. but we can turn it around. We've just got to turn back to God and actually start to apply His word in our private and public lives. Sure do appreciate y'all joining me. Hope y'all have a wonderful rest of your day, whatever it is. God bless y'all. God bless your families. God bless America. We'll talk to y'all again real soon, folks. Looking forward to it.